Hello, good morning. I'm not sure the microphone's working. I have to check. Working, actually.
Okay.
You are here. But it's soft, is it right? Charlie, you should go and take a... It's okay. Can you get?
Okay. Here we go. Once again. Great.
Hi. Good. Good morning, Vanessa, Sarah, Jen, Sean. Hi. Good morning. Diego, good morning. Everybody's there. Okay,
We're
good.
there?
I think
Okay.
it's they here. Can you talk?
Yes. How do I sound? Hopefully not too terrible.
I don't think it's working.
No?
Yeah.
We have to do again. Yeah. It gives me an opportunity to have some more coffee.
Let's make it closer. Let's just catch it better. Again? No. Go talk again?
Yes? How is it now? No better? Better? More or less okay? No? Yeah? Uh-oh.
Do it again?
How about now?
Oh, do it again?
How about now? Any better? No? Is it okay? Yeah?
Maybe.
Maybe? Uh-oh.
Yeah, it's better.
Really?
Yeah, it's better. Better. It's closer.
You think it's actually coming through the microphone?
Yeah.
Now
Sounds
that's
like
so
it.
it's, okay.
You're closer than I'm farther. That's good.
Okay. Close and far. Well, once again, hello everyone. Yeah, here we are. One second. I think we should turn off. Sorry, just to have one more technical detail.
Turn off.
Yeah. Okay. So there was a little extraneous noise which we did away with. So greetings everyone. I hope that we were all doing as well as possible in this still pandemic time. This is already more than a year since it began, since the discovery basically of the coronavirus discovery. It's a funny word to use for this. Since the beginning of the infestation, I should say. Well, there's, on the one hand, a lot to talk about, but I think I won't talk about so much today. Hopefully. Is it okay? Yeah. Yes. It's a last minute tweaking. So in the U.S., cases are finally going down, but are actually still greater than they were in the spring and summer time. So we are not at all out of it. Of course, Asia is doing so much better, with perhaps the exception of Japan, where the numbers are not incredibly great yet, but are actually increasing in a fairly rapid rate. There is good news, of course, especially in the field of vaccines, where there are more vaccines coming out, new ones, and there's news that the AstraZeneca vaccine that's developed in collaboration with Oxford University does protect against more contagious varieties of the coronavirus, and also that both the Russian and Chinese vaccines are effective. So there is great progress on this front, and there is the possibility, if distribution can be coordinated in a logical way, that we will see the end, at least, of the pandemic as it is now, with lockdowns and etc., etc. Again, in the United States, there's more good news, and that the Senate actually backed the $1.9 trillion Biden stimulus. Of course, though, they did it completely along party lines, with Kamala Harris actually casting the deciding vote. This, of course, is very good news, but still shows that there is great opposition to any kind of what I personally would call progress. And unfortunately for the United States, the motion to increase the minimum wage, which was part of the overall package, did not pass by a voice vote, which I never understood, because I always have the sense that someone can yell louder than someone else. I'm being rather facetious, but that's sort of it. The voice votes are very often, I think, used simply to vote, to decide against something without a real sense of decision, or, of course, if there's overwhelming majority for something, just to get it over with. Now, several members of the Senate, of course, voiced opposition to this great, horrendous, I would say, this increase in minimum wage to what is $15 an hour. It's still not something that anyone in today's world can actually survive on in the United States. And the reason for their opposition was that it would devastate small business. Of course, as musicians, there is large business, but by and large, how can I say, that's a funny expression, isn't it? I should say by and small, we are members of the small business community. And once again, this sense that, well, $15 will devastate small business because it will be too expensive to actually do business, does not take into account that $15 an hour will give the people who are working for that minimum wage a better sense of security in which to actually participate in the economy and have the economy become more healthy, which then will create more job opportunities. This basically, small business is a byword that people use to sort of feel good about what they are doing. Although, of course, support in the in government and in many areas is, of course, very anti-small business, and we can see that as huge businesses sort of gobble up small businesses. Okay, I think I've done enough about that. Internationally, of course, the news is now, at least from what I read, and then this is not the only news because there's a lot happening in the world, is in Myanmar, and that is the military coup, which has put, among others, of course, this Aung San Suu Kyi, whose name, of course, I'm not pronouncing correctly, once again, under detention. And now, once again, the army is in charge. Protests are occurring throughout the country, and especially in the largest city, Yangon. And as the New York Times reports, may soon lead to violent repression. This is, of course, terribly dangerous. And comes to my next, I could say, rant. And this comes from a book I've been reading, and I actually did show this book earlier. One second. How do I do this? Here we go. Uh-oh. No. Let's get this out of the way. How do I do this? I'm sorry. Cover. Yeah, that's it. Okay. This is by Amy Chua.
We press the next page.
Oh, because I can't see what I'm doing. Okay, I will be more less lazy about getting up and down from this seat. Okay. Now this book is very interesting, a little bit frustrating, but anyway, the basic premise, which is something that in a certain way it seems like so many people know, aside from so-called important people who are influenced by these sort of big ideas. Now, big ideas, of course, are ideas about political systems, ideas about economic systems, etc., etc., and there is something to be said for that. But in fact, her premise and her research has involved the study of groups and how people naturally, humans, like wolves, like elephants, like fish, actually break into different tribes, and tribal identity is often what is overwhelming and overwhelms both political systems, etc., etc. Now, one thing very interesting was in the development of the Soviet Union, as Stalin came to power, he undertook great massacres of people also, but he undertook a separation of, in a certain way, tribes, so that the Soviet Union was a collection of these different republics, and each republic had its own ethnic profile. So you did not have anything in a certain sense like what the United States has prided itself on, which is the idea of a melting pot, where you have different tribes, different nationalities, different ethnicities coming together, the different races you could call. Though races is a term which has no scientific validity. They will come together and become members of something which is greater than their simple tribe. Now, what we see today, and the pandemic has perhaps exacerbated this to a very dangerous degree, is a fracturing of the world once again into tribes, into different groups who are both competing with each other, which are functioning, which are working against something. So the important point about a tribe or a group is that you have loyalty inside, and that loyalty is often defined by an opposition to something outside this. And that brings me to a famous statement of Friedrich Nietzsche. And that is this, that insanity in individuals is something rare, but in groups it is the rule. The more I do these live streams, the more I feel that at some point I will speak in more detail about two incredibly important philosophers, and one, of course, is Friedrich Nietzsche, and the other is Ludwig Wittgenstein. Mostly I speak about subjects of which I'm an incredible dilettante, but for these I'm a little more than that. But that's not for today, at least, but keep that in mind. Of course, going back to tribes, these tribes and tribes that are intimately connected with issues of culture, so and they can be manipulated. The power of culture is also that it can be manipulated by people and by groups, let's say, who have ulterior motives and who profess to be, I should say, for this particular tribe, let's say, but in fact are working for themselves against them. Of course, our previous president is a prime example of this. Okay, enough. I move on, and hopefully this will be a rather concise little live stream. I mentioned last time about the fact that General Motors has announced that it will sell only zero-emission vehicles by 2035 and will become carbon neutral, as they say, by 2040. Of course, all this is very much still in the future, and that gives a lot of time for things to happen which will sort of mitigate against their plans this way. But what struck me about this was how General Motors, in their research department, actually a long time ago developed electrical cars, and after that actually developed prototypes of hydrogen-powered cars. I'm going to speak a little more about this. And what I want to do right now is to show a few clips from a very interesting and, in a sense, especially nowadays, rather important film, which is titled "Who Killed the Electric Car?" So I will do that right now. And I put this book here, which I will talk about right after this. Okay, and what I do need to do is try this again here. First I'd get this. This way, hold it. I have to do this. Sorry, as I mentioned, I always have to do this again because it reverts. Everything should be working now. Okay. And let me do this, I think.
In 1987, GM won the World Solar Challenge race. GM CEO Roger Smith challenged the same design team to build a prototype for a practical electric car.
To drive the motor for all the different driving conditions.
Allen's breakthrough power system helped create an electric car unlike any that had ever been driven before.
I had one of those early EV ones, and I used it here in the Capitol. I love the car.
Believe it or not, that sucker knows that he will take you down the PCH so fast you can get a ticket.
They were quiet and fast, produced no exhaust, and ran without gasoline.
And we started seeing the momentum building for this, and the waiting lists being created for these cars.
10 years later, these futuristic cars were almost entirely gone. GM spokesman Dave Barkmus has worked for GM for nearly 10 years.
We spent in excess of $1 billion to drive this market, to build the market.
We would sit down with Hal Riney or with executives from GM and make, how far, how fast, how much? These are the three questions we're getting. Please put it in the advertising. It's not rocket science. And they would go back and do the exact opposite. So we started this waiting list in order to prove demand to GM. But no matter how many people we got on that list, it was never considered enough demand.
We have heard about these long waiting lists. We contacted each of those folks, and we whittled that list down.
Only recently did they finally admit that there actually was a waiting list.
And we whittled that list down. We were having lunch in the executive dining room at the GM Tech Center one day, and just the two of us, and he leans over to me and he says, "Davos, you know something? You're my worst enemy." And I said, "Why is that?" And he said, "Well, I'm out there lobbying to show that there's no demand for electric vehicles, and you're out there proving me wrong."
As car companies made the case there was no demand, GM quietly closed its EV1 assembly line and began laying off its sales force.
They started with the ones with the biggest waiting list.
Studying General Motors practices over the years, the executives at the top, their motto seemed to have been going backwards into the future.
When I noticed that GM was losing interest was when I wanted to release my car, and they wouldn't let me.
They didn't give me an option to buy. They said, thank you for leasing the car.
Turn it in now. Turn it in by such and such a date, or you're going to be held liable.
GM did do it right. They did create a great car. It's well engineered, it's well designed, it's enjoyable to drive. I've never seen a company be so cannibalistic about its own product before. It's such an odd experience.
Flew over at General Motors, and looking down, we could see right next to the racetrack where the EV1 was first tested, we saw, I don't know, maybe 50 EV1s crushed and put on top of semi-flatbeds.
The fate of the last 78 EV1s remained in doubt. Chelsea led a last-ditch effort to buy the cars from GM.
Okay, General Motors contends that no one wants these EV1s here. Would anybody be willing to buy them for the residual price of the lease? And within 48 hours, over 80 people had signed up. And there were only 78 cars in that lot, and already we had a waiting list for a car that wasn't available.
Join me in holding this check offering $1.9 million to General Motors to put these cars back on the road.
Despite the offer, GM did not respond. Car makers argued that there was not enough demand for the electric car.
And we whittled that list down.
Claiming to have spent millions of dollars on advertising, they said buyers weren't interested.
$1.9 million to General Motors.
This General Motors 40, 50 years ago bought up the trolley systems and shut them down. The oil companies have opposed the creation of an electric infrastructure.
I made the case at the General Motors board that the reason for the EV1 was to give General Motors a very big head start. They could not understand how Toyota could possibly make a profit out of the Prius, for example. They were going to lose their shirt.
As it gave enormous incentives to buy SUVs, the federal government also sued California to stop the electric car.
It's David versus Goliath in a very big way. But if there are enough Davids in the world, we can win.
The last EV1s in the Burbank lot were taken away and destroyed.
It will go down as one of the biggest blunders in the history of the automotive industry.
We all have to adapt to change. Let's build new industries. Let's make America strong again.
We shred the cars, about a car a minute, 1,000 cars a day on a good day.
And what's interesting, the first thing we noticed when we drove up here, you're going to be shredding some new cars here too. These look like perfectly good cars. Why are you shredding them up?
A little bit of a mystery, really.
Goliath won this round, but now Goliath has new problems.
There's no precedent for a car company rounding up every one of a particular kind of car and crushing them as if they're afraid one might get away.
I know you're all worried, and I agree. There's plenty to be worried about. Like this solar power plant, already operational outside Los Angeles. Photovoltaic cells. They convert sunlight directly into electricity. Fluorescent. Lasts 10 times as long as a conventional light bulb. Uses only a quarter of the power. An electric car. Partially powered by solar panels. But the truth is, gentlemen, I'm not worried about any of these things. Because no one's ever going to know about them.
Okay. This is a trailer, of course. The actual film is much more detailed and quite interesting and very disturbing because we see what could have been. And this is something that we see quite often. Now, coming from this, also, there's the next development, which is the hydrogen car. Is it okay? Are we all right? I keep thinking that everything's going to collapse here. And that's actually playing out now in an interesting way because you have electric car manufacturers who will go unnameless right now, or I should say go nameless, that's what I mean to say, and they are lobbying against the development of a hydrogen-based industry. So things on different stages tend to repeat one another. Now, why do I talk about the hydrogen car? Because actually battery technology now, as it is now, is developing, but anyway, is dependent on rare earth metals. And a hydrogen-based economy will be based on something which is probably the most plentiful substance in the world. And it's something which is actually easily recyclable. And this takes me to a remarkable person who I never knew personally, I have to say, but I have kind of connection to, because my very good friend, the brilliant bassoonist Steve Dibner, I spoke about this a little bit last week, and I mentioned at that time that I was going to speak more about it this week, that this is his stepfather. His name is Stanford Ovchinsky, and the book which I've been reading about that is this one. Now, I speak about this for various reasons. First of all, Ovchinsky was very much the person who tried to show that electric cars were a pathway to a hydrogen-based economy. And he developed this concept which he called the hydrogen loop. And that he developed actually all the way back in 1960. So it was way before anything happened, that he had this sense of what could be in the world. And the difference between him and most, I would say, scientific geniuses was that he had the social consciousness to try to influence people, influence institutions to actually change things. He was ultimately not successful, perhaps, but in many ways he was. He was the inventor of the nickel metal hydride battery. He actually played a critical role in development of solar panels, electrochemical switches, which were based on the activity of neurons, actually. Even, things like flat panel displays, computer displays, TV displays, that way. And what is called phase change memory. These are all terms I'm just sort of spewing out. I'm not going to explain them, and I probably don't know enough about them really to explain in a very succinct and logical way. But everything of this is fascinating. Phase change memory is something which actually will become more and more important in the information technology, and et cetera, et cetera. Stanford Ovchinsky only finished high school. He is virtually self-taught, was, I should say, virtually self-taught, and that probably gave him the ability really to think outside of sort of established norms, or as we say now, to think outside of the box. And when I found out about this, I thought, yes, I finished a bit more edge of my formal education, but my own personal sense is that we hopefully, in school, we learn to learn. And then it's after school where we actually learn. And, that can happen at different stages. At his stage, it's remarkably happened. Very formative time. I will just read a couple of passages from this book. He said so the Economist called Ovchinsky the Edison of our age. Like Edison, he moved from being a solitary inventor to creating a large research and development laboratory that's called the Energy Conversion Devices, and to manufacturing several of his inventions. Also like Edison, Ovchinsky not only produced important new individual technologies, but also linked them in technological systems. Just as Edison's light bulb was part of a system that included power generation and transmission, the basis for mass electrification, so Ovchinsky conceived his energy technologies as part of a continuous system he called the hydrogen loop. Yet even the comparison with Edison, which several others also made, doesn't capture all of Ovchinsky's achievement. As Robert Wilson, the Manhattan Project physicist and founding director of the Fermi National Laboratory, that is one of the two major laboratories in the United States researching issues of atomic energy, pointed out, this is Robert Wilson, Edison was primarily an inventor. There is a larger component of pure science in Stan than there was in Edison. For unlike Edison, Ovchinsky made his discoveries on the frontiers of late 20th century physics, manipulating molecular structures and envisioning the new materials they could yield, learning to put together something that nature hasn't done. And perhaps most remarkably, he did all this without any advanced training. He drew instead on his lifelong voracious reading, his hands-on experience, and his penetrating intuitions. It's a remarkable person. I will talk just a little more. Now, here, well, this is a little bigger explanation of what the hydrogen loop is, but I think that that's a little too technical detail for this live stream right now. So I don't bother with that. Once again, this is the book. I explain a tiny bit more about it. And Ovchinsky also developed a way to store hydrogen in solids to make it basically what is a hydrogen battery, which would be stable and not prone to chance fires or explosions. He rebuilt Prius, this Toyota Prius, to run on hydrogen using these batteries. And of course, this was all done very far back in the past, I would say. This is 2021. This is easily about 30 years ago that all of this happened. So, let's hope that General Motors will move to zero-emission vehicles by 2035. If they haven't destroyed all their technical charts related to electrical cars, etc., then they should be ahead of all companies, including Tesla, for instance. We don't know if they have, but at least they should be well on their way to being able to do this. The question is whether they will have the economic and political will to do something which will at least help the world to survive. Now I move on, okay, to a very different topic, and I want to go back and highlight composers who I find very interesting, who perhaps many people find, not only me, find very interesting, very wonderful, and yet who are somehow underrepresented. These are individuals who are underrepresented, of course. And with that, I will go back to someone who I just mentioned briefly last week, and that is Ethel Mary Smythe, Dame Ethel Mary Smythe. Here, it's here. Yeah, here. First is here. And what I want to do, hold it. Yeah. This is Ethel Mary Smythe in 1922. Sorry, I've got a bit of a issue here. There we go. Ethel Mary Smythe was born in 1858 and she died in 1944. She was not only a composer, she was also an activist who was very important in England in the women's suffrage movement. In other words, to have women the right to give the right to vote and to have, as may say, equal rights as men do. That's and as a woman and composer, she was always criticized during her lifetime. When she wrote a delicate composition, she was criticized as saying that, well, this is very delicate, but it doesn't have the profundity of a man's one. And when she did the opposite, of course, she was berated for not being feminine. I mean, why is there so much stupidity around? Yeah, let's go. We'll come back. What is two things very interesting about her, aside from the fact that she was a very notable and in her own way an important composer, is that she went to Leipzig and she originally started to study with Reinecke, Karl Reinecke, who was a very big teacher of people, but actually was not satisfied with his teaching and went to study privately with Heinrich and Elisabeth von Herzogenberg. I mentioned about them last week. They were the great friends of Brahms, and Elisabeth was one of the two muses of Brahms, and the other one, of course, Clara Schumann. Elizabeth was a remarkable musician, and I'm sure that she was a very significant in her own way composer, but she always deferred to her husband. I think that's another issue. But I don't know her work, and I have not been able to find something basically of hers. I really want to do that. If any of you have any information, please let me know.
About who?
This is Elizabeth von Herzogenberg. Yeah, I will write this in a note about this. Anyway, through them, she came to know Brahms. And one thing which I wanted to play for you is a little talk she gave about her impressions of Brahms. Now, it's said that Brahms sort of didn't take her seriously. I think that was not actually true this way. But Brahms, of course, was a curmudgeon, especially at the time when she knew him, which was, of course, very late in his life. But her impressions are quite, in their own way, interesting, rather cute, and if you can get past her in a way supercilious English accent, which I think is just a prejudice that probably many of us have, which is totally unfounded. You can see pretty things that are pretty interesting. Let me try to find this here. I don't know why. Here we are. Okay. And this is 12 minutes, so I'm not going to play all of it. But it's on YouTube. It's interesting. Let me once again come back to here.
When I was a young...
Wait, I'm so sorry. But I want to make sure that this works. And yeah, things seem to be working now. If I can get rid of all this stuff here. And okay. Sorry, let me get this in a better way.
Young girl, I studied music in Leipzig and almost immediately became, to all intents and purposes, the adopted child of a childless couple called von Herzogenberg, who were well known throughout the German musical world. She was not only a magnificent musician, but a beautiful and, as I think may be gathered from a published correspondence between her and Brahms, a remarkable and most fascinating woman. I landed in Leipzig in 1877. In my heart, a passionate admiration for every note I had so far heard of Brahms's music. Hence my excitement may be imagined when I learned that he would be coming to Leipzig after Christmas to conduct his new symphony in D major at the Gewandhaus. It was at the rehearsal that for the first time I set eyes on the great man. When it was over, we were all hanging about, gazing our fill at the strong, sturdy figure, the clean-shaven face, and the piercing, bright blue eyes of the master, who had just got through what, in spite of ignorance and only a sketchy acquaintance with the language, I gathered was a far from satisfactory rehearsal. Though too inexperienced to judge, perhaps, I had a feeling that Brahms was not a good conductor, and certainly he had an unfortunate knack of rubbing orchestras up the wrong way. Later on, when I came to know him well, though of course my admiration for Brahms the artist remained the same, I cannot say I really liked or felt happy with him. Although as a human being he was not devoid of admirable qualities, one cannot say that in everyday life his personality was attractive. In society, and indeed in private, if anything upset him, he was totally lacking in what the Italians call educazione. His deficient breeding was painfully evident when people tried to thank him for the raptures his music gave them. This is always a difficult thing to do, but I am certain he would have missed it had the attempt been given up as too hazardous. For hazardous it certainly was, and many a time have I seen some shy, elderly, but perhaps profoundly musical lady slink away almost in tears because of his sarcastic reception of her remarks. At the Herzogenbergs things went rather better, and of course it was child's play to that brilliant woman to extricate victims from the lion's claws before they had been too badly mauled, a proceeding often called for in the course of a Brahms argument. Being at heart, as I said, a kind man, if anyone had pointed out the pain he frequently gave, he might have mended his manners, but nobody did point it out. Towards the close of an entertainment in his honor, entertainments that lasted into the small hours, Brahms the while devouring ham rolls, washed down with glass upon glass of beer and cup after cup of strong black coffee, a sort of after-the-battle atmosphere would often hang over the scene. Some of the injured had been removed on stretchers. Others were licking their wounds, brooding over a sortie that had gone awry, and hoping for a chance of making good before the lights were turned down.
Of course, this goes on and on a bit. It's very amusing, very cute in places, and well, quite interesting that as a recollection of the great composer. Now, Ethel Smythe is also notable, and she's because, like Beethoven, she became deaf. She lost her hearing, but that did not necessitate any kind of diminished activity in her composition. And of course, this is something which we as musicians understand very well, but is for, I should say, for much of the world, is quite astounding. Ethel Smythe was also, even though it was not sort of mentioned at the time, she was gay. That's but for me, it is her composition, of course, which is most interesting and in many ways wonderful. I would just mention before, I will play a couple of segments from pieces of hers. That one of her operas called Der Wald, which she wrote in 1903, was the only opera by a woman composer produced by the New York Metropolitan Opera before Kaya Sayajo's L'Amour de Loin. in 2016. So that's a very interesting little detail. And another of her operas, called The Wreckers, is very widely considered to be the most significant English opera to have been written in the period between Purcell and Britten. So I wanted to play just a little bit of the overture to that. Let's hope that that it still works. Just works this way. Sorry, I have to go back. This is not okay. Here we are. Oh, sorry. Goes on like this, very bombastic, of course. But for me, personally, what is more interesting is the early violin sonata of hers. That's, I should say, this opera is 1906. But the violin sonata is considerably earlier than that, and I will play you a little bit of that as well. Okay, I have to go back here. This recording is not great in the balance. A bit of the first movement. I think it's the very beautiful parts of that piece, and in 1887, it has kind of originality, and as a clarinetist, or as we as clarinetists, let's say, it's for all of you who are clarinetists listening now, the piece is in A minor, which is a pretty good key for the clarinet. And I will be doing a live stream about the art of transcription and reasons for transcription for the clarinet. And one big reason is to actually appropriate pieces which, for instance, in this case, the violin, who has this incredibly huge, vast, I would say, repertoire of standard works and works which are kind of neglected by that instrument, and yet we can actually use them to augment our well, I wouldn't say meager repertoire, because we do have great repertoire, but it is lacking in certain areas. For instance, where should I go? Okay. My little chair. Yeah. It's lacking in kind of middle to late romantic repertoire, which is anyway not terrible to have. Okay, now finally, again, I spent too much time on all of this, but I will move to the clarinet, to things, and I'm going to speak rather briefly, I think, today, more about rhythm. Let me put this away, and this away, here. Okay, I take this coffee here, and for last time I gave different exercises. Here, I go stand up now, and I put myself together. How are we doing? Can you still see me? Can you hear me, actually? Okay. So last week, I gave various exercises in ways to somehow, I should say, hone kind of rhythmic awareness that we have. And this is always the issue of internal rhythm there. And I mentioned about fingers and things like that. And I want to just go a little bit more over that right now. I take a clarinet. What should I take? Not this, not that. This, that, the other thing. Maybe I try this here. This clarinet here. Okay. So the ritual of the reed. I know. You think I'm just doing this on purpose, and it sort of is. Yeah, so it sort of will work, I think. Okay, now, there are more exercises that we can do with the fingers. Now, one exercise, I've spoken about this earlier, and this was a favorite of my teacher, Leon Rushinoff, and that has to do with developing rhythm in the fingers and to do with feeling a subdivision in the fingers. I mentioned last week how the idea of feeling inside larger rhythmic beats is very, very, very important. Okay, so here we can do the following. You play a scale, for instance, and you can do this with many different kinds of patterns. And I hope that works. I, again, have a problem with my finger, so I put this. Yeah, it sort of is okay. But I put my reed on totally wrong, as usual. So, we start. I will play a just simple scale, and we going up, we play, and then we play, squeeze, play, squeeze, lift, squeeze, lift, squeeze. Then going down, we play, since you have to pull your fingers down, you lift, squeeze, lift, squeeze. First is squeeze, lift, and we do this in the way my teacher did it. Let's say if we're playing quarter notes, we do this on the 8th note. And my own addition to his exercise is that you don't only squeeze the one finger that you're using, but you squeeze both hands. And even when the right hand is up, for instance, when you're playing the left hand, the right hand will participate in the left hand squeezing. So in other words, that way. Now going down, of course, we do the opposite, and we do lift, squeeze. So, and I should say again that in my version, we use both hands for this. So even when the right hand is working, the left hand is down, but still feels the lift, squeeze, lift, squeeze, lift, squeeze. So it sort of relaxes, squeezes, relaxes, squeezes, relaxes, squeezes. That way. I do this one more time. Wait, hold it. I got mixed up. Here we go. That way. Now, there are variations of this. So we can actually feel in the finger the subdivision, let's say in a triplet. So 1, 2, squeeze, 1, 2, squeeze, 1, 2. So that's this way. You can do different rhythmic combinations, of course. Let's say 1, 2. Okay, yes. can do different arpeggios, different patterns, of course, with this sense that the fingers can actually not only sort of feel a subdivision, but can actually show a subdivision, at least to us. How we're going, yeah, that we're working with. So that's another exercise. And now I speak about other ways that we should feel subdivisions and also basic rhythm. And that has to do with rhythm in the embouchure and rhythm in the air that we have. So let's say, just first I start with the air. And let's say, just doing a scale, and once again, I do the simplest things in 4. So 1, 2, da 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 da, that kind of thing. Whoops. My finger slipped. This finger is not working. Anyway, yes, this is, I call this pandemic dryness in the hands that I have. Now I lost my train of thought. No, not really. So the air can actually channel the rhythm there. So when I do something like this, I do not simply blow. Okay, that's kind of enough. No, I feel the rhythm of the 4, let's say. So it's like a, even I can say something like a he. So it pushes. Okay, that in a certain way gives you a kind of instant musicality, we can say, because it highlights a shape of the measure that you're doing. So this is, I think, very important, that the air delineates the overall rhythmic structure that you're playing. Notice also that I didn't squeak. Yes, I know, great. I'm getting all these comments from over there. But this, there was not only the reason that I did it the second time, and of course the second time is usually better this way, and I'm sort of more used to actually pressing with this finger with the Band-Aid, but it's that the fingers become more engaged when you have the air leading in a way. And if, let's say I'm tonguing, same thing. And I've mentioned before how I group things, the grouping. Now the grouping is not simply an intellectual grouping, but it's a physical thing, and it reflects the rhythm of these. So if I'm playing, that, right? Everything this way. And that's why I say that anyway, the air is your conductor when we're playing. It's our conductor when we're playing. And not only do I do that, but I try to visualize how the air is moving. And I've talked about this before as well, how the problem we have is that we do not see the air going. While, for instance, you're a string player, you have a bow, and that is very visible. Bye. Now, string players speak about bow distribution all the time, because you don't want to sort of get 2/3 through a phrase and feel the sound that no more bow, whatever, or that you have to change the bow in an awkward position. You're always trying to figure how you actually apportion the bow, and this goes back way in history, and that much of Leopold Mozart's treatise on the violin is actually devoted to these different kinds of ways of, not only ways of bowing, but ways of apportioning the length of the bow that way. So we need to apportion the length of the air. Now, what's interesting is, see, apportioning the bow is actually a rhythmic issue, because that bow would go a certain amount of time, for a certain amount of space in a certain amount of time. This way. So if you're playing that way in one bow, you have to feel 1 2 dee da dee da dee da dee da dee da dee da dee. You have to feel that the bow is moving at a very specific rhythmic pace. That way. And with us, we have to feel, as I mentioned, that the air is moving in a very specific rhythmic pace. So even if I want something very smooth, before I did yee, here I feel something like that. For instance, yee, I feel how the air is moving in a rhythmic way, and has, I would say, actually a physical dimension, which of course it does, but we don't see it, but I imagine it, I feel it, and we feel that here. Yeah. But it's sort of like, and then the exercise I have, you can do, let's say 1 2 3 4. Let's say I want to do a little faster, 1 2 3 4, but to move there. Let's say I want to make a crescendo. I start with this little slower, and then it speeds up. But I'm just still going in a rhythmic way. 1 2 3 4. So let's say I do crescendo diminuendo. That way. This way. Let's say I do short notes, and you can go, and you will notice that if you do a short note, if the long note is this way, then the short note cannot be, or can be, but you lack energy with that. So this, in fact, the air is faster and has longer distance in the same amount of time. Okay. If anyone disagrees with me, please feel free to say what you wish in the comments. Can you hear me? Am I mumbling? That's at all? Is it okay? Okay. So this is how the air can shape things here. Then there's also the combination of air and fingers. Let's say I move between two notes. Yeah. And this is actually something which came from a very, very kind of casual perusal of a little bit of what Marcel Moïse, the great flutist, wrote. Because he had many different kinds of exercises about phrase shape. You do. So here you go, say 1, 2 that way. So you move to 2, and you can move to 2 with a crescendo there. But I feel 1 and 2. So the finger now going up is squeezing 1 and 2, and the air is also pushing to feel that 8th note on the motion to the 2nd note. Now you can do the opposite. For instance, let's say it comes down this way. So you can do 1 and 2. Then, of course, we can do it in additional rhythms. So I go back to the triplets. So it's like 1, 2, and I do going down. Or going up. Okay, so this is the sort of way that the air works with the fingers. And in my case, and I think it should be in every case, and I mentioned this very probably first of these live streams about the feet, that I feel that rhythm in my feet as well. And I don't think you can see it, and I don't want to show it. This is the pandemic shoeless culture. Yeah. But anyway, as a member of a Japanese household, that's having no shoes is sort of the way inside the house. Okay, here goes. So the feet, as I go. So I feel that going down, and so in a way, the whole body is participating in the subdivision of rhythm, and in the motion of what they. This is something like that. 1, 2, and this way. So what else should I talk about now? Now I talk about the embouchure we have and rhythm in the embouchure. Of course, we go back to the acoustical nature of the instrument and the partials that we have, which correspond, these are the different registers of the instrument. And one thing is that when we change registers, of course we change the embouchure. And this change also has to involve rhythm. So if I'm playing, I actually move in a rhythmic way to the third partial. That way, going all the way up this way, moving all the way this way down. Sorry, I should actually be better prepared. I do know the mouthpiece. All this said, of course, equipment does make a difference. Now I play. Going up to there, I know, this is really... I take pride in my terrible reeds here. This is terrible. Sorry. But anyway, the register, which of course I'm totally belaying what I'm trying to say by not actually producing things in a very beautiful way. But here we go. Nothing is working.
The other one was better.
Yeah, I know, but I was playing on this mouthpiece, and I thought that rather than trying to change the reed, I would just change the mouthpiece, and with the another reed. But that reed is so bad. But let's see. Yeah, because this reed is okay, but it was just way too soft for that particular mouthpiece. This is better, right? Something like that. Anyway, the register, the embouchure changes the register. Trust me, I'm not doing so well today. I'm thinking, but I know. You see, actually, that would have been the one I should have used, but too late. I know. That's all right. You see, I think we're all in it together, and no matter who you are, there are times you make mistakes. That's definitely the case everywhere. Okay, so that is the case. But not only do we use the embouchure in a rhythmic way to change registers, we use that for basic expression. You see, and the sense of the way the embouchure will change. For instance, I'm doing the scale again. So the air is moving, but also the tongue, and this is feeling that rhythm. That way. And what should I play now for you? Let me see. Yeah. Let's say even here, if I'm doing the shape of that note, the sol that I have, concert F, comes from an actual stretching of the embouchure in a rhythmic way. So it's not and this gives you a kind of proto-vibrato, we can say, on the clarinet. It's a way of changing color in a rhythmic way. So this is the embouchure change. Now I have to mention another thing, which has to do with how do we outline musical structure. And the problem we have is that generally we are taught that each note follows the previous note. But in fact, as hopefully I've shown in many of these live streams, and for instance, very early when I was showing the implied polyphony in Milton Babbitt's My Ends Are Beginnings in the opening, we see how, do I put this somewhere? Everything is taken.
There's one.
Over there. Yeah, I'll go back here. So, in Milton Babbitt's My Ends Are My Beginnings, we see how this note that's here actually relates to that note that's there. And the other notes relate to other things. So it is not true that, in fact, each note moves to the successive note. I should say that, and in a kind of linear fashion. Things are put together in different ways, and if you with tonal pieces, for instance, and we study harmony, musical harmony, let's say, in a sensitive way, we actually begin to understand that. And this is another reason why I call myself a practical Schenkerian. This is Heinrich Schenker, this great theoretician who I have many qualms with, though I have a big debt of gratitude to his basic conception, which had to do with overall structure. And this you can find in small details, in large details, in large form of a whole piece. Okay, so maybe this is good. I'm going to do this. See how this works. What is this mouthpiece 2? This, I think this is not going to be good. I should probably change. I know people put up with me, but I don't know why you do. Oh? Because I'm always changing clarinets and mouthpieces and this and that and the other thing. It's just as you know, as you're in the profession, you sort of accumulate. So I still have too many. Wow, that's no good. I'm going to use that same mouthpiece that I had there, or maybe this is a 15. Now I use that. No point in trying to dilly-dally. Why am I doing this, you wonder? Again, I take very most famous pieces. For instance, just this Mozart concerto. Yeah, I know. And it says and this is a work which Charles Rosen, the great pianist and theoretician, called kind of an endless song, he said. And that's because things he can to keep leading with this. And that's actually not only true of this piece, but very, very many pieces. So the question is, how do we do this? So rhythm is not simply a matter of going 1, 2, 3, 4. And usually I hear that way. But in fact, there's a difference between the ends and canade. So it's almost like if you're dancing and you're dee da da dee da dee da and dee da dee and dee that way. So we have to feel in the embouchure and in the air and in the fingers, of course, and at least for me, in my feet, how we do this kind of dance step in sound, which is that way. It's very simple. So a way I teach this, or try to teach this, I should say, is if I have someone, it's good to do something with the left hand, then the right hand can actually do other things. So. You see. Now, if we analyze it carefully, we'll see that there's a little bit of a crescendo involved in that. But we don't think of that as crescendo. We think of that as leading, in a way. So, not. That way. So. And even there, no. And there, that's interesting, because with this deceptive cadence, it doesn't lead to the next note. So that's oh. And there again leads this way. Okay, so the sense of this gesture, which we have to feel in our bodies, is very, very important for an overall sense of rhythm. It's a real rhythm. The rhythm is connection this way. So, okay, what time is it? Because, oh, it's so late. Because I wanted to play 2 pieces. No, I'm saying no. Let me play 1 piece. Can I do that? Okay, because I wanted also to highlight composers, other composers, specifically for the clarinet, who I believe should be played by us. So I go back to the B-flat clarinet. Or maybe I should just wait till next week. Shall I ask people what they want to do? That's because perhaps I wait. Well, I'll just play 1 movement of this piece, and then I will continue it actually, because my next topic that I was thinking about was how different ways in which jazz has influenced the language of classical music. And what I want to do is to play 2 pieces. Well, I'm going to play more than that, but I was trying to highlight 2 composers who are very important for the clarinet, yet I think nowadays are virtually unknown. One composer especially is unknown. His name is Charles Wittenberg, and I'm sure that very few of you who are listening now actually have heard of Charles Wittenberg, but he has written a few pieces which are important for the clarinet, and one in particular was at one time rather popular, and as a student, of course, I played quite a lot myself, but yet in the past many years, in fact, it has not been played at all. This work, I'm just going to, I think I will play just the second movement of this today. And unfortunately, it's rather hard to read because all I have, there is a published version, but the published version is a version which he simplified because I imagine he was just told that it was a little bit too difficult, but it's not. And the original is very much more exciting. And the element of jazz comes to play in the kind of frenetic way that he organizes the rhythm of this piece. So this is the second movement. Next week I will play the whole piece. Oops. Okay. And with that, take care, everyone.